joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman underscores the importance of adopting a policy of neutrality toward the conflicts in the region and of transferring the resistance weapons to the Lebanese armed forces. A delegation from MP Walid Jumblat's National Struggle Front holds talks with Speaker Nabih Berri on the efforts to reach an agreement over a new government and parliamentary electoral law. And Saeed Hassan Nasrallah gives a speech heightening tensions created by the Syria civil war. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman has underscored the importance of adopting a policy of neutrality toward the conflicts in the region and of transferring the resistance weapons to the Lebanese armed forces. Sleiman added the Baghdad Declaration was issued following a national dialogue session at the Baghdad Presidential Palace last year. It underscored Lebanon's neutrality with regard to the events in the Middle East region. The President's remarks came a day after Hezbollah Secretary General Saeed Hassan Nasrallah said in a speech that his group will receive advanced weaponry from Syria and will support the liberation of the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights in a defiant response to Israel's recent airstrikes in Syria. A delegation from MP Walid Jumblat's National Struggle Front has held talks with Speaker Nabih Berri on the efforts to reach an agreement over a new government and parliamentary electoral law. Transportation and Public Works Minister Ghazi Al-Aridi has warned of heavy consequences if an agreement wasn't reached. He said the region is passing through a very critical phase that will leave its impact on Lebanon and urged all sides to act in a manner that would protect the country. Prime Minister-designate Tamam Slam's mission to form a new government has been hindered by the March 8th camp's demand that it be granted a veto power. Salam has been adamant in his rejection of allowing any bloc to receive such a power, saying that such a cabinet cannot be productive. Vacancies emerged in a 6-member military council with the retirement of 3 of its members. Al-Akhbar newspaper says the development may prompt Army Commander General Jean Ahwaji to request assuming its duties and responsibilities. Ahwaji, Chief of Staff Wali Salman, and General Secretary of the Higher Defense Council Mohammad Khair are its remaining 3 members, it added. The council needs 5 members for it to be held, and it will lose its decision-making authority starting May the 2nd. The Daily said the army will be completely paralyzed without the legal quorum, and added this paralysis will affect its mobilization and efforts to supply it with arms and equipment. Justice Minister Shaib Qurbawi says he is upbeat that Lebanese hostages in Syria could be released soon, saying it was likely the year-long episode could end shortly. Qurbawi released his statement following talks with Prime Minister Najib Mikati at the Grand Sarai and preferred not to give more details to protect the negotiation process. His remarks came after the head of General Security, Brigadier Jean Abbas Ibrahim, was expected to begin negotiations with the Syrian government over the kidnappers' demands. Meanwhile, the families of the pilgrims continued their protests today, holding a sit-in outside the Beirut offices of the Turkish company Pegasus Airlines. In remarks published in An-Nahar newspaper, Turkish ambassador to Lebanon said the daily sit-ins by the families were going too far and losing sight of their goal. On the 25th anniversary of the establishment of Hezbollah's Al-Noor radio station, Saeed Hassan Nasrallah gave a speech that heightened tensions created by the Syrian civil war. Follow the details of his speech and other recent developments in Syria in the following report.
In a fiery televised speech, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah said Syria will supply his party with game-changing sophisticated weapons in response to the Israeli raids around Damascus. He hinted that such arms could change the balance of power between Israel and Hezbollah. Nasrallah also said Syria will open the door to popular resistance in the Golan Heights and that his forces will support any Syrian effort to recapture the land.
If the aim of Israel's attack was to prevent the strengthening of the resistance capabilities, then Syria will give the resistance sophisticated weapons, the like of which it hasn't seen before. We announced that we stand with the Syrian popular resistance and offer material and spiritual support as well as coordination in order to liberate the Syrian Golan.
Sayyid Nasrallah's comments on the Golan Heights come as Philippine Foreign Minister Secretary Alberto Rosalio aims to pull out 342 soldiers on the peacekeeping duties in the Heights, nearly half the number of its UN peacekeepers worldwide, after the abduction of 4 Filipinos by armed rebels.
We have served with dedication the peacekeeping duties in that area But as I said, because of the changed circumstances, it's possible, highly possible, that our recommendation would encompass an early pullout of our people there, because we believe that the exposure now is beyond tolerable limits.
Meanwhile, in the United States, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said the U.S. remains committed to helping Syrian rebels bring down the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Hagel also discussed his recent trip to Israel, where the two countries cemented an arms deal.
Using the full range of tools, the United States will continue to work toward achieving our goal of ending the violence and helping the Syrian people transition to a post-Assad authority. This will help restore stability, peace, and hope for all Syrian people.
Hagel's comments come amidst talks between the U.S. and Russia to arrange an international meeting on the Syrian conflict by the end of the month. The Syrian Foreign Ministry welcomes such developments. However, it stressed that only Syria can determine its future. Meanwhile, in Turkey, Prime Minister Erdogan claimed Bashar al-Assad has fired missiles with chemical weapons at his opponents, crossing President Barack Obama's red line a long time ago. He also stated that Turkey sent a team of 8 experts to the border with Syria to test wounded victims of the country's civil war for traces of chemical and biological weapons. Erdogan also said he will soon present his findings to the Security Council at the UN.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has arrived in Russia's resort city of Sochi for talks with Syria with Russian President Vladimir Putin amid a new international push to find a way to end the 2-year conflict. Cameron flew to Russia ahead of his planned meeting with U.S. President Barack Obama at the White House on Monday. The high-profile visit is part of frantic diplomatic efforts to bring the warring sides in Syria to the negotiating table amid claims of the use of chemical weapons and increasing fears that the conflict will spill over Syria's borders. Cameron said there was a growing body of limited but persuasive information showing the regime is using chemical weapons, including sarin, and the room for doubt about this continues to diminish. Earlier this week, Russia and the United States offered to hold an international conference in search of peace in Syria. Well, coming up next, a 65-year-old Brazilian woman is crowned Sao Paulo's most beautiful elderly woman. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tells Chinese state media that no conditions should be set for meeting with Palestinian leaders in order to seek a resolution. Netanyahu was in China at the same time as Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, who said he was open to a meeting with Netanyahu on the condition that he recognizes the 1967 borders. Chinese President Xi Jinping used Netanyahu's 5-day trip, the first trip by a top Israeli leader to China since 2007, to urge him to restart talks with the Palestinians as soon as possible. Beijing has maintained close relations with the Palestinians for decades. In recent years, it has also cultivated ties with Israel, though the Jewish state is wary of China's links with Iran. The violent political campaigns in anticipation of the Pakistani elections ended today. On the last day of rallies, contenders Nawaz Sharif and Imran Khan addressed the crowds. Follow the country's most recent political developments in this report.
Pakistan's most violent electoral campaign comes to an end 48 hours before the May 11 polls. The polls are considered a democratic milestone, the first time a civilian government has completed a full term and handed over power to another administration. However, the elections have not come without a price, as campaigns across the country were marred by terror threats and attacks by the Al-Qaeda-linked Pakistani Taliban. The Taliban has claimed the lives of at least 117 people, including candidates, by mainly targeting secular-leaning parties in a bid to undermine elections they regard as un-Islamic. Before the campaigns came to an end, party leaders made their last speeches. One such leader was cricketer-turned-politician Imran Khan, head of the increasingly popular PTI party. Khan addressed his supporters from his hospital bed after injuring his back after falling from a mechanical lift.
I request you to vote for candidates of the PTI, whoever they may be. I accept that we have made mistakes. I agree that some of our candidates might not be up to our standards, but I promise you from the bottom of my heart that every member of parliament will either fit himself into the standards of the PTA.
Khan has predicted a tsunami of support for his party as voters, particularly urban youth, are turning against the traditional grandees of Pakistani politics after years of misrule and corruption. Khan's PTI party is struggling to contend against Pakistani People's Party, which presided for the past 5 years over a nearly failed economy and was widely castigated for allowing the country's Taliban insurgency to spin out of control. Also running is current Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of the Pakistani Muslim League. Sharif, who is perceived as a likely winner of the elections, made one last speech on the day of the campaign.
God willing, when your fate changes, then the destiny of the nation will also change. Young men, you are the architects of the future. The green flag of Pakistan is in your hands. Do not let it bend down.
The likely outcome of the elections is a hung parliament, where not one party commands a majority. Such an outcome will lead to a formation of a coalition government, which analysts say will suit the military. Through coups or from behind the scenes, the military has ruled Pakistan for more than half of its 66-year history and is still the real center of power.
And now for news around the world in brief. Bangladeshi rescuers have found a woman survivor in the rubble of a garment factory complex in Dhaka, which collapsed and killed more than 1,000 people. One of the rescuers said the woman, Reshma, had cried out for help as recovery teams sifted through the rubble 17 days after the 9-story Rana Plaza building collapsed in the outskirts of the capital. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has arrived in Afghanistan for a troop visit. Merkel landed at the German camp in Mazar-e-Sharif in the morning to continue her flight in an army helicopter to Kunduz. Together with German Defense Minister Thomas de Maizière, Merkel laid down a wreath for the fallen German soldiers in Afghanistan and attended a memorial ceremony. Merkel's visits come shortly after a member of Germany's special forces has been killed in Afghanistan, the first German soldier to die in the country in almost 2 years. Scientists and astronomers from around the world have gathered at Tennant Creek in Australia's outback to view an annular solar eclipse beginning just before 7 a.m. local time. An annular solar eclipse happens when the moon moves in front of the sun and a thin ring of light forms. The next total solar eclipse will be visible from Africa, Southern Europe, and Eastern Americas in November of 2013. British Olympic sailor Andrew Simpson has died after a catamaran capsized during a training session for the America's Cup off the coast of California. Simpson, 36, who won the gold medal at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, was sailing with the Swedish Artemis racing team in San Francisco Bay ahead of his summer's America Cup when the catamaran turned over. He was trapped underwater by the catamaran's platform for about 10 minutes. The doctors could not revive him after he was freed from the wreckage. Ohio authorities will seek aggravated murder charges against a former Cleveland school bus driver accused of kidnapping and raping 3 women during a decade of captivity in his house. The aggravated murder charges would stem from the forced miscarriages that police alleged were suffered by one of the women at the hands of Ariel Castro, 52, who was accused of holding them captive at his house in Cleveland. County prosecutors Timothy McGinty said at a news conference that his office intends to pursue charges of kidnapping and sexual assault, as well as aggravated murder, which could carry the death penalty. A judge set bond for Castro at $8 million, $2 million for each of the 3 young women and a child born in captivity. An ammonia leak was detected in the cooling system outside of the International Space Station. Crew members at the orbital outpost spotted white flakes of ammonia floating away from the space station, and NASA says fixing the leak might require that a portion of the station's cooling system be shut down for about 48 hours. Officials said the leak appeared to be getting worse, but NASA reported that the station continues to operate normally and the crew is not in danger. Ammonia is used to cool the equipment that provides power to the station's systems. The space station, which is staffed by rotating crews of 6 astronauts and cosmonauts, is a $100 billion research outpost owned by the United States and Russia in partnership with Europe, Japan, and Canada. 65-year-old Brazilian Irenilda de Oliveira Menezes has proved it's never too late to be a beauty queen, as she was crowned Sao Paulo's most beautiful elderly woman. The finalists, all residents of Sao Paulo over the age of 60, competed in the annual beauty contest organized by Sao Paulo's State Health Department to coincide with Mother's Day celebrated this coming Sunday. Contestants dressed up twice in their finest gowns, modeling before the judges and a supportive and joyful crowd. Organizers gave out awards for Best Smile, Congeniality, Elegance, Beauty, and even Shyest. This year's youngest contestant was 60, the oldest 87. Organizer Anelton Guedes said the most important thing is for the ladies to feel like they are taking part in life, She said, and I quote, "Life hasn't stopped for them. They are still in the game. And if they don't have a boyfriend, they are looking for one." This marks the end of our bulletin for today. And now, for a reminder of our headlines. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman underscores the importance of adopting a policy of neutrality toward the conflict in the region and of transferring the resistance weapons to the Lebanese armed forces. A delegation from MP Walid Jumblat's National Struggle Front holds talks with Speaker Nabih Berri on the efforts to reach an agreement over a new government and parliamentary electoral law. And finally, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah gives a speech heightening tensions created by Syria, the civil war in Syria. Those were your Friday headlines from Future TV, live from Beirut. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you a very nice weekend. Have a good one.